One that we called for in the past on many occasions was the audit report, and that was finally published. The one we're calling on now is the medical board report, which is a locally based report and which focuses on specifically on ocean views and on the services afforded to those service users in the facility.
And do you have any expectations of what you might see in that report? Any insights you've been given already?
I imagine it's the same kind of thing, that there is very little structured activity for residents, that perhaps that they don't get the personal plan when they leave that they need to get. The same kind of thing we saw in the previous report and partly in the audit also.
Now, these reports do obviously serve to highlight the issues service users are facing, but what happens after them? Have you seen any progress made since the initial audit that you requested? Do you expect something will change following the publication of this report? What's the use in the reports without action afterwards?
Things will change, but just because a report is published doesn't mean that things are going to change. I mean, that's why we're calling in the PR that we brought out this week. We're saying that we want to see published the actual 5-year plan for the implementation of the report. And that hasn't been published yet. And Karen Buckley said in February, I think it was, that the report would be published, that the 5-year plan, because she left it done before she left. And I think she left in March sometime. I'm not sure what the dates are. But obviously that's available. But we haven't seen anything. Mm-hmm. And in terms of have there been any improvements to the system? Not that we've noticed. And since we had the Viewpoint program, we've had ever more people coming to us. People who are at the end of their tether, who don't know where to turn to. These are usually relatives of service users, because the service users usually are too unwell to take any steps for themselves. So if they have a supportive family member, it's usually them who comes to us and asks for guidance. Something that is also of concern, which was pointed out in the audit, is that Gibraltar is a very medicalized community. And of course this happens because sometimes people go to the GP, and the GP at times has no option other than to medicalize, because talking therapy is very difficult to access. It's much easier and much quicker to give somebody a prescription. But of course, these prescriptions, these medications might help in some cases, obviously they do, but in other cases they just mask the symptoms of whatever the problem is, but the problems are very often not resolved. And it's very, very clear that good practice in mental health involves a lot of talking therapies and not just medication.
So tell us a bit about some of the issues service users are facing at the moment. You mentioned in your press release that a lot of people are turning to private consultation because they're not finding the services
here. Those who can afford it will go privately. But of course many people can't afford it, and we have a system which should cater for everybody who needs it. Obviously I don't think there are enough professionals, even if we have what somebody somewhere has decided is enough psychologists or enough psychiatrists or whatever. It's clear that this isn't happening, because if somebody who is in dire straits turns for help and they're told that they have to come back or they can't get an appointment for 3 months, I don't think that system is working well, working efficiently.
Now, you've also highlighted some professionals that have ended up leaving through contracts not being renewed, or a number of issues. You've mentioned that there's no psychologist at the moment.
Well,
so can you
yes,
tell us more about that?
For many years, for most of Ocean, KG5 and Ocean Views, for most of its lifetime there was no psychologist based on site, which obviously was something that was terribly wrong. A few years ago, I'm not sure exactly how many, maybe 3 years ago, something like that, they did contract a psychologist who was extremely popular, who was liked by everybody. I can only say that she is no longer in post. As far as I know, there's nobody else who is doing her job. And you hear about these things, and you'd like to know exactly why this has happened. Unfortunately, because of the Official Secrets Act that people sign when they're working for government, people can't speak up or choose not to speak up because they're worried about the circumstances. And this is what happens in Gibraltar, that the people who know what is going on are muzzled by the Official Secrets Act. And we only get things from hearsay. I mean, I know stuff that I can't speak about either because I don't want to compromise the people who told me. But I know for a fact that sometimes people leave not because they have good reasons to go. I'm not saying that very clearly. Basically, they leave because they're not getting the support in the system, or things in the system don't work as it should.
You've also highlighted a couple of other professionals that are no longer in their posts, those that dealt with substance abuse specifically.
That's
so
right.
Could you provide us with a bit more insight into how substance abuse is being tackled at the moment?
Well, again, I don't know, because these two doctors were the only ones who had the proper qualifications to do so. Whether somebody else who doesn't have those qualifications is doing some of that work, I don't know. But obviously this is not something that we should want in the long term. In the long term, we want people who are committed to their work and who feel supported in the system and who stay on because they feel supported in the system and they feel they can do their work properly. Unfortunately, I don't think this happens a lot of the time. And ideally, what you would like is for people in the system, other professionals in the system who perhaps are not so precarious, whose job is not so precarious, to speak out and say what's going on.
So why do you think we find it so hard to keep these professionals working in their posts?
I think so because I think the system doesn't work well, and I think people get burnt out, and people don't like some of the things that go on and the way, and I think if they point out that things are not working the way they should and so on, I think ultimately what happens is either they end up by resigning or their contracts are not renewed. I think that's what happens.
So is it correct to say that there is currently no psychologist working at the Ocean Views mental health facility, to your understanding?
To my understanding, there isn't. No.
And on the issue of substance abuse?
There might be a psychologist who is occasionally available for somebody. I'm not saying there isn't, but I don't think there is anybody who has been employed as a psychologist for Ocean Views.
And on substance abuse, same?
Again, I don't know. But part of the problem is that these things are not, are not officially sort of known. You just hear through the grapevine. And even if the sources are reliable, they're not official.
So what can really be done about this? Do you have any ideas?
I think people need to speak up more. I think people, service users, I think relatives of service users need to speak out publicly, and I think we need to put enough pressure on whatever government is in place to sort things out once and for all. I think the opposition also needs to raise the issues. I think they have raised it in the past, but only sporadically, and I think it's something that needs to be fought for very strongly.